the project will look when it's done. I actually posted a video of that, and I think I mentioned it once, but I actually meant to go through it with you. So we'll do that real quickly. So this is video of finished assignments. It's in the modules. It's in the reference materials. And I just thought, I don't know if it'll help, but it basically guides you through what it all would look like when it's done, because we keep adding to it. So if you visualize it, maybe it'll make it easier. I don't know. So I'm going to run that real quickly. It has no sound. I don't have a microphone at home. Does this, can we make this take over?
Down on the bottom right side of the YouTube video, there's like the box that makes it full screen.
Okay, so I gave a little text that this is a video to give you some idea of what the project will look like after the assignments are finished. This shows the code for the home controller when we added the grant types to it. I think I was showing the files over on the side, which is why it's scrolling over there. I really need to get a microphone. I don't think this takes very long, but so this is a picture of the community assist with grants and services on the front page. See where it goes next. I went to about. I did make a little bit I did modify those pages. I'm not too concerned about those. Contact. The register. This is what we're going to work on today. Basically creating a form, and I have it slowly typing things in. Come on, type. It has all the memory of everybody that was ever typed in, which there must be a way to turn that off. So this is actually the part we're going to work on today, is doing the registration. I'm actually going to start you, first I'm going to do it in book review, and then I'm going to start you in community assist, because you have to actually create a new class. Because if you might notice, I don't know if you've paid attention to community assist, but this part is in one table and all of the rest of this is in another table. Does that make sense? And so we need to create a class that kind of combines those two, and then we can pass it as a bundle. And I'll show you a little bit about doing that. We'll also be using a stored procedure to write the registration, because one of the things that it has to do is basically take the password and hash it. And it's better if it's done at the thing. So this is logging in. Yeah. And that's not today's assignment, but that'll be coming up. And then there'll be donate and apply for a grant. I tried to let things move slowly so you could see them, but it is sort of agonizingly slow sometimes. So I'll show you how to do that drop-down list. I was just choosing the mostly pre-done values. So this is sort of what we're looking for getting all this done. Does that make sense? That's what all of these assignments will add up to. It's something that looks like this. If it helps to visualize it, you know, because we're just building all the parts for this. And I think let's kill the video. What is it doing now? Did I keep recording while I was just, oh, I was going to SQL Server to show you that these things had actually been written. I know microphones aren't very expensive. I'll have to get one. Especially if I do the summer database classes, next year online hybrid. Did I mention we might do that? There was some, because people like to work in the summer. And so we're thinking it might give better attendance if you didn't have to attend. I don't know if you need to see this, but if you want to check that it actually wrote it, we can do that. Oh, we hung a long time maybe for writing this. And I magnified, okay. Gives me an idea of what it looks like for you guys up there, back there when I'm working in here. This is almost done. So it just goes down and you can see in the person, if you go down to the very bottom, that we added Morgan Brown. And the person's password was hashed there. You can see that. And this is from person address. And then I think will be. There's also one of the things that the store procedure for login does is it writes it all to the log. Right, whoever logs in, it records them when they log in. I didn't actually do that. That actually is because I hit the wrong key. Go. For the donation. I don't know if you need to see all of these. Because the next thing would be the person address. Where did I do that one? Oh, for Mammy. To show that her thing and then the donation. Let's stop it. I think that's enough because this is just confirming that things are there. All right, so that's there if you ever want to look at it to see if what's, you know, if it's going somewhat right. Questions on that? No? Okay. I meant to do that right before we even started. All right, so this is the book review. The other thing is you might have seen an announcement. I have a version of this that I'm uploading to GitHub. I'm uploading it from home because I can't get the GitHub to work here, and I don't know why. Several people have tried to help me. We haven't got there. I'm going to zoom a little. So one of the things I wanted to show you, if you do it at home and if you're using a full version, there's a web config file So I'm going to open that, and then we'll start the stuff for today. Down in this web config file, if you go far enough, there are connection strings. And in the connection string, there's SQL client. It gives you the SQL provider. I'm looking for the one that has the actual up here. If I keep going across, SQL provider, notice it says SQL Express here, // Express. If you do it at home, that may be localhost, right? Sometimes just changing that one thing is enough to change. Like if you do it at home and bring it here, you might have to go and type it in // Express there, and it's in the web config file. If you take this home, you might have to go in and type localhost. The error that you get is that it can't find the server, right? Because the name is wrong. Or you can rebuild it. As I said, it's not horribly hard to rebuild, but it can be kind of a pain to have to, just keep parallel copies. That's actually what I'm doing now. So the other thing I'll show before I begin, I'm going to go to GitHub. This is GitHub. But I'm going to go back and repositories. And the one I'm doing that's current is the book reviews 2018. So this is the one I'm uploading from home. It does have different commits that kind of, like there's the entities and controller wizard commit. There's a registration commit. I've actually committed the files for today. There are, this is the one I'm doing. It also has, if you go down to the web config, and if you look at the command, the connection string, and then let's just go, am I in the actual, let's went back to the thing. All right, so I want to go on the connection string. Notice that this is localhost. So if you were to download this, you would have to change that. All right. And there's a link. I made an announcement with a link to the current GitHub for this. I think we're ready to start. I'm going to close the web config. Generally, I would suggest, other than maybe changing the connection string, that you not mess with the web config too much, unless you read up on it quite a bit. So, quick review, and I will give you probably Wednesday as an open lab to do what we're doing today. Does that make sense? And catch up if you need to catch up with anything else. Not too worried about due dates. So we have added, this one has the category controller. So we added one with the wizard, right? I did it a couple of ways. I did it with books and I did it with categories. This is one with the categories. When we look at the categories down here, it create, delete, details, edit, and index. One reason I usually run that, even if you delete it later, is that it's really good to see those templates so that you can steal from them. It's really hard to come up with this straight, just barehanded. Whoa. I'm worried about that bulb. This one. It just blanked out for a second. And it keeps telling me that it's about to die. So, all right, so we did that. And the other thing we did is we modified, actually I'll do the home controller. And what we did on the home controller is we added the books to list. So I'm just reviewing this before we go on to the next. Up there we had to add a reference to the models, right? So it can actually see the models. The book review database entities is the entity classes that we added. Is the whole set goes under that name. I did not create that name. And for Community Assist 2017, it would be Community Assist 2017 entities. It always takes the database name and adds the word entities. All right, so that's, if it's not there, it can show there might have been problems loading the entities. One of the things you can do is build the file. Sometimes that brings it back. Worst case scenario, delete the entity files and reload them. It's possible you could fix it, but as I said, it takes 5 minutes to run the entities again. The only thing is if you run it again, it'll probably be review entities 1. And if you run it again after that, it'll be review entities 2. Okay. So we did, we returned. DB stands for the entities. Books is a collection table in there. It contains all the books. And we turned it to list, which is basically just like a list in Java. You know, it's just an array that doesn't have a limit in size. And it's an array of objects, those objects being books. What else do I want to say about that? Is there anything else? So on the view side of that, we modified the index and basically created a table to loop through the data in the books table. The other thing you have to do for that is you have to add IEnumerable book revolt, the name of your project .models.book. And it would be grant types for your thing, right? So any questions on that? That's pretty much what we've done so far. So we ran the wizards and we let it create the controller and create all the views. And then we modified an existing controller. Does that all make sense? You're all with me still or no? Why? For the most part.
Will that section be necessary to do a read today? The one I have doesn't have this part.
So actually, it's not. It'll be independent of that. Most of the things that we do don't depend on the others. The only thing they all depend on is having those entities in there. Does that make sense?
They depend on which?
The entities, the model.
Okay.
They all depend on the model. But other than that, they're independent of each other. Okay, so what I want to do today, so we're going to do a registration. The registration in book review is similar, but a little bit easier than the one in the assignment. So as I said, I might take you a little bit into the assignment too. So I'm going to go to controllers and I'm going to right click. And this time, instead of modifying a controller, we are going to create one. So I'm going to add controller. And I am going to make it an empty controller. Right, so it's just going to be an empty, and we're going to add the code to it. It's not a lot of code, but there are some things to, get the hang of. Well, so when I do the controller, I'm going to add. What we're doing here is register, right? So I'm going to call it, you can either call it registration or register, whatever you want to call it. I guess registration makes more sense. So I'm going to call it registration controller. Names may vary if you go to the GitHub. So I'm going to add it. I'm going to do a little bit different than the assignment, partially just so we don't have to go to the database to confirm our registrations. Come on, you can do it. Scaffolding. Okay, so here's our controller. It's utterly empty except it has an index, right? It also added a registration folder under views. It's harder to see, I know. It's empty right now. There are no views in it, but there is a folder for it that will go with this control. So, do you want me to do the extra step or just do it exactly the way you guys would be doing it? I guess I should just do it the way you guys would be doing it. What I did in the GitHub version, just to be clear, because it's not clear what I'm saying, is on the index, I printed out all the reviewers. And then I created a separate form for the registration. And that way, when I register something, you can tell that it exists, it worked because they show up on the, but I'm not asking you to do that in the assignment. So the question is, do you want me to do that extra bit here or no? You'd say yes? Okay. All right, we'll do that then. So what we'll do for index, this is pretty much the same as what we've done for the home. I'm going to do using, this is book report MVC winter 2018.models. All right, so we need that using link to the models. If you don't put that in there when you want to get to the model, like to the entities, you'd have to say book report MVC winter 2018.models.entity, DB entity. So it's just a pain to do that. I am going to put this at the class level. I'm going to make a reference here because we'll use it in more than one place. So to the data entities, so I'm going to do book review DB entities equals new book review DB entities. And you don't have to name that DB, but it's just a short, easy way to name it. Right? The variable name can be anything. So by putting this at class level, it means I can access it from any method, right? It's class level cross scope. If I were doing it only in one method, I would probably put it inside the method because you're supposed to give things as the least amount of scope necessary. But because I'm doing it in multiple methods, I'm going to put it there. Down here, I am going to do exactly what we did before. I'm going to do db.reviewers.toList. That's just what we did with books or the categories before, with the grant types, right? And the index page for this is actually going to be exactly like, I'm going to make a couple of little tiny differences to it, but it's going to be a lot like what we did before too. And again, the only reason I'm doing this, you don't have to do this part with your assignment. You can either use index for your form or you could just put a link to your form on it. I'm doing this just because this way we can see instantly if the registration took. So I'm going to, since we're done that, let's do the index view. I'm going to add a view. So I go to the view registration, right click, add view. We need to name it index. The name of the view has to match the name of the action result method. Does that make sense? I'm going to add it. The one thing that's a little different here is it is empty, which gives us this. So at the top, I'm going to do @model. And then I'm going to do book review. Actually, I probably want to do IEnumerable. And then book review, MVC 2018. Yeah,
For the ballot box that you were putting back, did you leave everything in default?
I did. Did you get the same thing I did there? Or?
I just didn't quite keep up. But
Oh, okay. That's the other thing. Not book review, reviewer. If you need me to slow down, if you need me, I mean, please tell me. I'll slow down. I'll hang at a place for a little while. I try not to go too fast, but I know that I do at times. Particularly, I also know it's hard, even if you're good at typing, it's really hard to look up here, look down, look up here, look down. You know, it's just hard to keep track of what's going on. Yeah. So whatever your program project name is, .models.reviewer. Reviewer should be the same if you're doing the book. Yeah.
Is it okay that here
No, it should be the same. What is it not like about that? Book review, DB.
modifying it to not
Oh, I had some. I had some.
Oh, you need to give it a name. DB after. Yeah, give it a space. And you have to give it a variable. DB works just fine.
Well,
Yeah. Oh, so all the tables, and then underscore procedures and views. I guess you can take them all. We don't need them all, but you can take them all. Any other questions before I move on? So we make the reference to the model, and then we're just going to do the quickie table again, right? Instead of index, if you want, you can name it reviewers, because this is just a heading. This one you want to leave as index, but the other one you could do. And I'm just going to add table, class equals table, which should be lowercase. TR, TH, HTML dot, and I'm going to do display name for model, that lambda symbol, model dot, what do we want? Do we want probably their first name? I'm going to just copy that because it's a pain to keep typing that. And then I can do this as their last name. And I will do, actually this one I'm going to go back and see what I got here. Probably want their email. And I don't want their hashed pass. I don't want their key. I don't want their key code. I don't want to actually even see their plain password. Let's just do the date enter. That'll be good enough. The green is, oh, you know what? We're not really. I just did this when I didn't need to. Yeah, I will. And And again, what I would do after I type the first one is pretty easy just to copy and paste the next one. The form, when we get there, is just a mess, but you can copy and paste from div to div and just change the values. I'll walk through it at least once manually. And this part you don't have to do for your assignment, for this one. This is just an addition. All you have to do is a registration form, which we will do after we get this set up. Let me know when you're ready to move forward. So as I said, Microsoft has tried to make everything really simple. It's not simple, but they've tried to make it so it's not as complex as it used to be. And this syntax, weird though it is, saves a lot of lines of code. So the lambda is supposed to be referencing a given function. So you can create functions that refer to functions, and the lambda is basically, I don't know if I can explain it intelligently. It's similar to what they used to call delegation. If that makes sense. A function, that there's a generic function that a specific function calls to do its work, passes it some parameters. The thing is, you never see that underlying function, so.
Is one of those the name of the underlying function?
Well, so we're saying that in the model, we're looking for, I'm actually not sure, none of them really are. I don't know, I need to read up and get a good explanation of lambda, because I'm not sure I have a good explanation. I do know that they're in all the languages now, even Python has them. And they're meant to be a shortcut for doing certain kinds of complicated things.
Does the display name for
They actually don't call them hidden, they're called anonymous functions.
does the display name for a function grab the name of the field out of the database? And
There must be something in the model class that they've designed that has a function that takes this as an argument, is what I'm thinking. Yeah, let me read up on it and see if I can come up with a clearer explanation. You've seen Lambda, do you have a good explanation?
Anonymous function. It's much better.
Yeah, it's really hard to explain, but it's really nice in that it just makes life simpler. But it is weird. I mean, you see these, and you'll see these in, as I said, you'll see it in Java, you'll see it in Python, you'll see it in all the languages are using anonymous functions now. They used to have them in C++, I'm sure they still do. I think that's where they originated, actually, the idea of an anonymous function. You guys ready for the next part? Yeah, 1 more minute. This is just a sample. Once you type one of them in, again, it's easiest thing is just to cut and paste and change the values. The only value you need to change is the one after the dot. Right, so dot and the field name, those are the only things you really have to change after the first one. I'm going to start the next part and then I'll hold. So I'm going to do a for each. Var, again, is a variable for, we haven't any quite idea what this is going to be. What? It's like a variant type, yeah.
Yeah, so instead of like some of the bar, they say, hey, something that has to call basically cheap.
Yeah, they were.
It's like, hey,
They used to, var is fairly new in C#. It used to be always you had to say double or integer or string or give it a type or an object type. And in fact, instead of var, what you would have to do is say object, because object is the parent of everything, so anything can be an object. But that didn't give them quite the flexibility they wanted on some of these, because what a var does is it lets each row or each field resolve into its own kind of thing. So anyway, item is not a, I mean, you can name this whatever you want. It's just item comes to me easily on this, but it could be anything, right? It's just a variable name. And then what we say is it's in the model. And the model in this case is reviewer, right? I want the mouse.
And it's reviewer because
That's because what's up here, right? Yeah. It's also what we passed. If we passed something different than what we put in that first line, it would throw all sorts of errors. And you wouldn't have any IntelliSense, you know, when you're trying to get the thing. So what I'm trying to do without moving this thing around too much is we need curly braces. And basically, we're just going to do what we're doing is we're looping for the data. The display name for just returns the column head. The main difference down here is that I'm going to, I'll say at HTML. This one is just display for instead of display name for. It has the model still and the lambda, but this time it's item because we're accessing the item in the loop. And then I do dot, and you can see that it has all of the, so I can do first name and close that. It's exactly the same pattern. The two differences, display for instead of display name for, and then item instead of model for the getting the field names. And again, if you name this variable something other than item, then whatever you named it, dot. And then I can copy this, and then I'll hold after a minute after I do that. I really would suggest copying just because this stuff is tedious to type. You could do that. You could do that. What am I doing here? This is email. Actually, when I do it,
change a couple things if you do that. You can change it from display name for to display for.
When I do it at home, I just grab the top four for the bottom, and then just drop out the name. But it can be confusing. So I just I've been doing it by a block. But yeah, when I do it at home, once I've got this block, I just copy it, paste it down here to take out the name, substitute item for model. It's not that hard to do. So yeah, we could actually run this just to see if it works. And then we'll go do the part that actually is relevant to the assignment. The more you do this, the easier, the more sense it makes. That being said, it's still fairly complicated because everything's spread out all over the place. How many of you have done any Android? It's similar.
Just going to make that point. I kept trying to draw an analogy between Java and Eclipse and this. This is more Java and Android development.
Yeah, I mean, they're splitting things out the way that Android does. They're not quite as bad. You don't have to have a separate string section, an XML string section. You don't have to have a, you know, it splits things out even more. But it's essentially that same feel. You know, you got lots of little folders and you're splitting things out.
You create something and you actually only edit one little bit of this huge thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, most of this is auto-generated, which is good and bad. I mean, if you had to write all the code that was in here, it would take forever. But
I like about doing this is, it saves the web page that you keep building it, and compartmentalize it, you have contrast in there.
sure, yeah, you can do. Debugging can be a bit dicey at times, but it's actually not a bad framework. It's the one that, from what I hear, that Microsoft uses the most internally when they're doing their web stuff. Though I've heard some people at Microsoft cuss it too. The MVC. mostly.
For some reason,
You have nobody?
oh, I see.
Or you tried it?
Oh,
Oh, you don't have to. You did TRs on all of those. You need those to be TDs and the other to be TRs. So there aren't very many people there. One reason I don't suggest doing this for your assignment is that there are like 180, I don't know, 120, something like that, people in the person table. That's a lot of people to put on a page like this. You don't necessarily want to do that. All right, so we did this, and the whole point of doing this is that once we do a registration, we can look. Do you guys need a moment more on the code? Yeah. I want to close all. I want to close this one anyway. So let me stop it from running. Which part? This or the controller? So most of this, other than the HTML, is just, I mean, the HTML is just HTML. Microsoft, now one of the things I didn't spend a lot of time showing you at all, so there's another approach, which is the web form version, where they have a whole set of tools, kind of like they have for Windows forms, where you can just drag them onto the form. But from what I've heard, not as many people are using that. They prefer the straight HTML to the Microsoft substitutions for HTML. You guys need it still here, or you got it, or finding a way? I also know that sometimes I stand right in your way, so you can always let me know if that's the case. All right. We're good. So before I go change the registration controller, let's look at the categories controller. Now, this one didn't have a lot of things to do, but one of the things we will ignore the details, but we want to create. And the first thing you get is an empty create. We're going to make it register, but we want to do the same thing. We want an empty create. This is the controller for categories. We also did books. So if you do books, I mean, if you did the books instead of categories, that's just fine. The one where we just auto-generated it. The other, in your own assignment, the the business rules one will have these different things, but it'll be a little more complex because there's more fields. But you need an empty one, right? What the empty one does is it returns the form. And then you need one that has the HTTP post. I'm still not entirely 100% sure you need the validate forgery token, but I always add it. These are compiler directives. So basically, you know, when you do a form, when you click the button, it does a post right back. So this is telling it that this method is to respond to a post. Inside of this, notice how it has bind, include, and it lists the field names. And it gives category is the class from the model, and then it does gave it the same name but lowercase. So this is what we're going to have to do with our form, is we're going to have to do a bind, include, and list the fields that go with the form. Does that make sense? And we'll create a class. It's a way of creating a class. And then down here, ours is going to be a little different. They just added the category class that was passed in to categories, which is the collection of categories. They saved the changes, and then they return to the index. All right, that's what they do. We're going to do something similar, except that instead of add and save changes, we're going to pass it to a stored procedure. And again, the main reason for passing it to the stored procedure is that it will hash the password for us and things, which won't happen if we do it just this way. So the first things that we're going to do, questions on that? So this, I'm using this as an example, right? And again, one of the reasons why I had you run the business rules as the wizard is that you have all these examples you can go back to. I could not have done these on my own when I was doing it if I didn't have the wizard examples to figure out what the code should look like. Though there are lots of tutorials online. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to go to the registration controller again, although you could get it from the tabs up here too. So I'm going to name this, first of all, I'm just going to do a public action result. I'm going to call it registration or register. Let's call it register. And the reason I want to do that is mostly because I'm a little leery of naming it the same thing as the views folder.
If we name our controller register.
Then you might want to name it something else. So my controller is named registration. So if you named yours register, then you might name this registration. Does that make sense?
Okay.
You just don't want to name the names to be the same. If you name two things the same, the chances that it'll get confused are high. So if you named your controller register controller, maybe name this registration. I named mine registration controller, so I'm going to name this register. That would be fine, as long as they're different. Then, as long as they're named differently. Doesn't have to be big differences, as long as they're different. This is true of programming in general, but especially I found I've had people, nothing works, and it's because they've named two or three things the same. And it wasn't throwing errors, but it had no idea what thing to call. So for this one, all we need is return view, and view as a capital. Okay, so the point of this one is just to return the empty form when you name it. That's all you have to do there, is return form, or return view. So I'm going to do another version of this, which will be a little more complex. What time is it actually? It's not 12:52. It's
10:52.
10:52. I haven't taken you into the next class, have I? All right, are we ready? Okay. So I'm going to, first of all, do those compiler directives. So we want HTTP post And then I'm going to add, and let's see if I can get that up a bit. Is it anti-forgery? Yeah, validate anti-forgery token. Pretty sure that's what it was. You guys don't have to do this. I'm just, okay, yeah, that's correct.
You don't have it?
No, you didn't have to pop over to make sure I got the right one. I honestly don't know if this is, the HTTP post is required. I don't know if the anti-forgery one is required or not. But since every example I've seen uses it, I just keep it in there. One of these days I'll leave it out and see what happens. Having got those two things, then I'm going to do public action result. And it'll be the same name as the one above. So it's basically a kind of overloading. But then I'm going to do bind. Actually, bind needs to start with a square bracket. And then parentheses, include equals. And then what we need to do is list all the fields that we need. I'm going to hold on that for just a second. I mean, it's going to be underlined and problematic for a moment. There's also exclude if you want. I'm not going to do that, but you can say which fields to include and which to exclude, right, if you don't want all the fields from the class. I am going to, inside of here, partially I want the IntelliSense to know what fields I want to take. I'm going to do int result equals db.usp, new reviewer. And this gives me the IntelliSense for what I need. I need the reviewer username, first name, last name, email, and plain password. Yes. It's small, and I'm zoomed and it's still small. But this is the IntelliSense to tell you what this stored procedure requires, and that's basically what we want in the class up here. So I am just going to do, except it goes away. So that was username. So I'm going to do reviewer username. I'm going to break this line just to keep it on screen. You don't have to. I'm not sure I'll keep it all online anyway. Reviewer first name. Reviewer last name. I wish I could break that line. I could break it here. It was reviewer email.
I'm not sure if it matters, but I think the IntelliSense the one reviewer is lowercase.
I don't think it matters. It just will pass it to the, it'll just, basically, they'll be just replaced by position, not by name. And then the last one, which is going to go off screen no matter what I do, is reviewer, is it plain password?
Plain password.
Yeah. Right. In fact, I remember that. Review plain password, which is a typo on my part in the database. Review plain password. But you have to kind of match. All right. So, weird thing about this. Yeah, the weird thing about that is that it's just a big string. And that's a bit of a pain. I'm going to do the very last thing, which is Well, I think that goes outside the square bracket. I think I could break here. Actually, I'm just going to call it R. And then I'm going to try to get all of this on screen. This is going to be worse when you do community assist because it has more fields. But it's the same structure exactly. You do a bind, include equals, and you list all the fields. You don't have to list them in the same order as this, but you have to enter them in that order here. Right, so I'll show you in a moment how we do that. But
Where do we see all the fields? Where did you see?
so when you did this, if you put your cursor right by the parentheses down here. Yeah, in the parentheses. Oh, there you see. Yeah.
Where do they have it setting fields?
So tools options. Yeah, you could do that. You could do you want me to break that up? I could do that. So if I want to break the string, I haven't tried it here, but
Just return. No, just go back and just return. It'll automatically join.
it will.
Yeah.
If I just hit return here. Huh. That's interesting. I've done that manually. I never realized it would do it automatically. So these are underlined because we haven't finished things yet. You guys ready or need a moment? Okay. So the USP new reviewer is red because we haven't entered the parameters. Let me know when you're ready. Is that helping here?
So what was the reviewer R?
So this is the class. Basically what we're doing is we're defining a class on the fly, but it's a class that already exists, right? We're defining an instance of the reviewer class. I'm going to name it R. I could name it reviewer. Like that other one was categories with a big letter and then categories with a small letter. The thing is that if I did that, if I said reviewer, which I actually did do in the GitHub, I'd have to say reviewer dot when I was putting the fields in. It's a lot easier to say R dot.
My reviewer is not. Just keep going. I heard it's red.
So did you close the quote?
Yeah, so you can try it once. Oh, yeah, well, so,
So, yeah.
was a odd square bracket in the brackets.
Those are red because we haven't finished. Anyone else? Before we get... So basically what we're going to do is we're going to add all these fields to the stored procedure. We're going to pass them to the stored procedure. So I did an R rather than reviewer. So again, if you do the opening thing there, it gives you the list of all the fields in the orders that they have to go. So I'm going to do R dot username, reviewer username, comma. Yeah, so, and then we can do R dot first name. And again, I'm just letting the IntelliSense guide me, but R dot last name, R dot email, which I have to go up to. And then I need the plain password. So R dot plain password. Couple of things that the store procedure does is it hashes the password. It also enters the current date as the date of registration and does some other things. If you want to see the stored procedure, I could show you sometime. It's just SQL. Yeah, I wrote it ahead of time, save you guys some effort. Because it would be, and it's not uncommon that if you're the web page developer talking to the database, that the stored procedures and things are pre-made for you. All right, so this needs a semicolon here at the very end. Here, let me break the lines, and then I'll give you a minute. So I'm just going to break them I'm just trying to get it all so it shows on the screen nicely. So when you do the, the stored procedure, you just have to pass it the parameters. And inside this parameters, it takes the plain password, actually puts a random number with it, hashes it, and then adds the current date and does a few other little things before it inserts it. Which we could do in code, but I actually think it's better to do it on the database then.
How much more do you got?
What time is it? You guys need a break? We could break here for 5-10 minutes. We're actually close to being done, except for the form. Well, so we'd have to build the form, right? We have to build a view. And there's like 3 lines left here. But I'll give you a break until, so it's 10:09 instead of 1:09?
Yeah, it's
Right.
11:09.
11:09. Okay, so about 11:20 we'll go on. I know this stuff is intense and it takes a while. You could build now, but it'll throw errors because there's stuff we haven't finished yet.
So just as a general rule of thumb, do you like build your project before every 3 years?
Well, if you run it, it builds it.
Okay, so it
It automatically builds it if you run it. Yeah. But I would build it before. Well, that depends. So, like right now, if I were to build it, it would fail because the action result has to return a view.
Okay. So does the .NET runtime environment just automate compiling?
Yeah, compile if it will run, it'll compile, right? If it doesn't run, then you might want to save it because it only saves when it compiles. That's the only auto save. You need a chair. So we're working on building a form, and this is for a controller for it. I am videotaping it, videotaping is good on putting it on YouTube. And then there is an example on GitHub for it. There's a bit more up at the top. There's this part isn't super important for this. This is you have to have this empty version. Lectures seem to last so long, even if only for 10 minutes, it just feels like forever. Yeah. I don't have that on mine tonight because I'm going to which controller. The category one? Yeah. So you might have done a different one. Let's see what you got. We might have done reviewer in class because I did a couple of different versions of it. A couple of different types. Reviewer probably has the same stuff. In fact, it probably is better. Yeah, it has all the. I think we did one version where we did the reviewer controller.
What's the US stored?
That is the stored procedure in SQL Server.
Universal stored procedure? What's the
User stored procedure. It's just a naming convention.
Right.
And we loaded when we did the entity thing. Remember, we chose stored procedures too. It was one of the stored procedures. So we're letting it do the work. Part of the problem with the entity structure is it gives you the structure of the tables, but it doesn't do anything extra, right? And it also, like with the person and address, if those fields are split off, it's a bit of a pain to try to do that with two tables. So we'll make one table out of it, one class. The entity model is good for what it does, but the relational model of a database doesn't always translate well into objects. What you want to do with your object-oriented program. Maybe hard to believe, but this stuff can kind of be fun. Oh, right, yeah, it's really, that's why it's when you name something, it's really better.
They weren't making sense though, I was confusing myself so much.
But actually, that's a really good thing. I mean, maybe it's frustrating and painful, but it teaches you, in the end, you get to see how things are great or not. It never hurts to break things, because you can always use sand.
What I ended up doing was just and it rebuilds like quickly because it was just a few little parts that I had off. And I discovered those as I was doing.
Yeah, I actually think that's good. So we'll start again in about, what is that, Sam, so about 4 minutes. Unless everyone's back, but I don't think everyone is back. How many are we missing? I think we may only be missing, yeah, I think we're missing like one. Maybe a couple people that fell asleep. It's still warm. It's not as warm. Actually, for anybody, if my voice drops off, let me know, because I know that I don't always project the best, and it's a long room. Okay, are you guys ready? Do the finishing touches here. So, does this make sense? We are doing what I would consider intermediate C#, but we're not writing a lot of code, right? I would not expect you to know how to write this code. I would expect you have to see it. I mean, that's one of the things, having the template there so you can look at it, look it up online. I mean, it's not something that I would think you could do. Even if you'd had ITC 110 as C#, there's a bit of a leap here. So, but again, it's not a lot of code. Microsoft tried to reduce the amount of code you can do for good or ill. So a couple of things. We need to be able to return a view, and this is slightly different than what you will have for your assignment, in that I'm going to return it back to the index page. You could make a page, when we looked at that example online of the things, it went to a thank you for your registration page. You could make a view that just has that in it, and you could redirect it to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say if result not equal -1. And there's no reason you should know that. Can you guess why it should be that? Right. What happens is SQL Server, for a stored procedure, returns -1 if it fails. Right? It returns 1 if it succeeds, and it returns -1 if it fails. So basically we can test. So if this didn't fail, then what we want to do is, right now I'm just going to do return redirect, I think. Yeah, redirect to action index. So this is going to just take us back to index. And the effect of that is that we should be able to see the new reviewer added to index. For you, for your assignment, I would just redirect to a different view that says thank you, right? And that's all you have to do for that view. You can name the view thank you, whatever you want, and just write HTML H1 thank you, whatever you want. So I'm going to do one other return, and I'm just going to say return view. And that's, if it fails, it'll just return you to the form. You could do more error troubleshooting, but I'm just going to return you to the form. So if you press the button and you return back to where you were, it means it didn't go. It should go. So if it succeeds, it'll take you to index. If it fails, it'll just return back to that view. You do have to have a separate return down here, because it won't be happy if you just have the if, because it means there's not all paths lead to a return. Does that make sense? That's the whole method. We're done with the controller. You guys need a minute on that?
So if you only got one,
If you comment that out, it should still throw an error. So if I comment that out, if you go up here, notice it's still red underlined up there. Because if you do it, it says not all code paths return a value. Right? Because if it does equal -1,
Then it needs to know what
it needs to know what to do. So you guys got this okay? That's the complete control. The form is a pain, so, but we'll do it. The one part I want to show you on the Community Assist is the person class. If we don't get to it, I'll do it first thing on Wednesday. I hope we get to it. We're moving okay, I think. Just, do you guys need any more time on this? We can't run it yet because we don't have the view.
Right,
Yeah.
We could run it, but we wouldn't be able to see what it's doing.
Right. I mean, if you compile it, it should compile. So if I do build solution, it should build just fine. Generally, you could tell that it would build just fine because there's no red underlined stuff in it. Oh, I shouldn't have built it. Come on, finish the build. Okay. Fridays are open. So Fridays are open. Sometimes you can get in on a Saturday. Anytime there's not a class in here, which is, it's pretty utilized, but does anybody know?
I think Alex would be here on Fridays, to 5 or something.
Yeah, Fridays are wide open, but they're maybe the only day that's wide open. There might be a couple hours here and there that you can get in.
I think Saturday Eli comes in for 3 mornings.
Yeah, which wouldn't help much for this.
But he doesn't know how he set the first mission.
You'd have to build everything, so okay. All right, let's go to,
What you do is you put your stuff on the other.
yeah, although it doesn't always pull down. Have you done that?
Okay.
I mean, sometimes it pulls down and says there's something missing, which can be a pain to fix. So I'm going to do registration again as a view, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a view. And what you name this depends on what you named your method. So I'm going to name it register. So if you named it registering, name it that. It needs to have the same name as your method. And I'm going to add it. Okay. And then in the view, just like always, one of the first things I'm going to do is add the model. So I'm going to do add model. And I'm going to, I don't think we need IEnumerable because we're not going to loop through anything. So it's just, what is my name of my book report? MVC, whatever you named your project, dot models, dot reviewer. So we just add that. But we don't need the IEnumerable because we're not looping. Register is not a bad title. All right, so give you a second. What I'm going to go do is I'm going to go steal some stuff from the, you can either do it from the create, from the, yeah. Is that your name of your project? What does it say? Anyone else have a error? Not sure.
I'll take it on the cell phone.
Oh, yeah, don't send it.
No need to go because you think about it, it's not that. It's just one.
Did that fix it? Okay. So I am going, and this is, I'm going to go to categories. And I'm going to go to the create because it has the form. All right. This is a mess. And I really suggest just copying it and pasting for a lot of this. All right. So you've got using HTML begin form, HTML anti-forgery token, which kind of goes with the other one. And then we're doing a div class. And this is a bootstrap class for form, which is form horizontal. This is just a heading on the form. There's I added the horizontal rule, I think. And then, no, actually, I didn't do that. We need the, from this HTML to go into this div for a field. And basically what it's got a validation summary, the label, where basically that's like the name for it. And it gets the edit for is basically the text box. And then it has a validation message for the text box. You could type all this in, but I am going to suggest I'm going to copy this whole form over because there's another part you need down here too, which is you need the reference to the scripts, the jQuery. You never did the one where we did the wizard all the way through?
I did it each time, but I always did it once.
Okay. So if you don't have any of them where you did generated the wizard, so it might be the books that there's only two. So go down to use the book. And there's a create book.
Oh,
So you might have done a different one.
Oh, I see. That's,
I did, this is partially my fault because I did this like 3 times, right? And I did it with different things each time.
what's that for again?
So create is the one that has the form. And again, I'm just going to copy this whole form and then we'll modify it. I would suggest that just because it is a real pain. We're going to put it in the register view, the register C HTML. I'm going to put it right under the heading register. And then I'll walk through it and we'll make some changes. Yeah, I said, can you imagine typing that in by hand? You can do it. I did it a few times. All right, so the category name, all of those things are wrong, which is fine. For this H4, so this is the begin form. It's when they say using HTML begin form, that's basically what they call Razor. It's C# scripting. It's telling it that you're beginning a form. The anti-forgery token, I think, is they do some things in here like the text boxes won't allow you to enter things like @signs. Well, they will for the email, but they won't let you enter some things that are commonly used for hacking. It's to prevent accident. It's to prevent like SQL injections and things like that. Yeah. And so if you try to write some script, it's a pain if what you really wanted to do was to insert some script or something, because it won't let you. But anyway, so category here where it says H4, I'm going to just say registration. You can name it whatever you want. You could even leave it. Yours might say books if you did that. So there's nothing I need to do here, but I'm going to change the fields on each of these. So the first thing was username, right, in our model. And if you do a dot there, you'll see that it has the reviewer fields. So the username was the first thing that we did. And then I'm going to change everything here to reviewer username. So I know this is confusing, and if you want, though it will take us a lot longer, we could walk through typing it all. So now it's happy now. And if you did the book, you have 3 or 4 fields already, right? But if you did the category like me, then what you need to do is to copy from the HTML validation summary to this lower div. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to just copy that, press enter a couple of times, paste it, and then just say reviewer first name, and change all of those. The only thing you have to change if you copy it are the field names. So I have it still in here. I'm just going to do another paste. And this will be their last name. And then I'll walk through it again Again, if you type this all in by hand, which you can do, it's a real pain, but maybe it would help you understand it more. I never typed it in by hand except once, just to have done it.
Can you change it in one place and change it in the other?
No, you have to change it in it. So let me do one more. So we got last name, first name, we need email. So this is email. It'd be nice if it changed it in the other two places. Yours did it? Oh, you know what? Some of you did reviewer, right? So your form is fine. You could just copy your create form over and it's fine. If you did reviewer in that thing. But I did categories on this version, so I have to copy all these. The other thing you could do is you could probably run a, I think this is the last one, right? Email password. Yeah, and it's review plain password.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be review plain password. These don't have to be in exactly the same order as what the class has in the controller and things because they're mapped to a particular field. And so it will map it to that field in the class. Although I think it makes your life easier if they're in the same order. So everything that we had that we're passing down below. So I have the username, first name, last name, email, and plain password. And that needs the plain in there. That's because I did a typo on the database. But it has to map the underlying database. Yeah. Does that make sense? Because this is the whole form. We're actually ready to run.
I also discovered, and I don't know if anybody else did or what, but instead of like highlighting, last name to change it to email or whatever, you can just double click it and it will highlight the whole thing, reviewer plain password, like reviewer's last name, and you can type the next one, like double click to highlight the whole thing and then type first name and it just automatically brings up the next name that you need to double click. Use the IntelliSense as well. It's a little quicker.
Where were you doing that?
Like right there, that what you have highlighted, review
Yeah.
plain password. If you, double click that and then start typing like email, it will just bring up reviewer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Put it.
All right, the button down at the bottom. This last div class is for the button. It's fine. It just says create. If you wanted to say register, you could change the value to register. But input type submit, value equals create, class button default. Those again, this is just HTML. The submit type is the type of a button. Create is the text you want on the button, and then the class is bootstrap. Right, just to make it that. This action list takes you back to the list if you want, which is fine. Takes you back to index. And then you need this reference to the jQuery. The validation stuff it's doing is from jQuery. Does that make sense? One of the things that Microsoft did, even in their web forms where you drag and drop stuff, is they had their own tools for all this. They just went to jQuery. Sure, you shouldn't have to make any changes to anything there. If you copied the whole form over. If you didn't copy the whole form over, you might want to add this stuff. Because if you don't have this little piece, you can click that button forever. Nothing will happen. Same too with the I want to put an action link at the top. And then, as I said, we'll be almost done here with this. Do you guys need a minute more? Again, you could go back to your other form and just copy and paste this in stuff. Good. In general, well, this is actually, I don't think we're gonna make another little form later, which will be the login form, but not today. But we won't be making a lot of forms. Yeah, except I want to do a couple of other little things just for, so right where we start the form, right above that, no, it actually wouldn't be here. Be on the other form. This form's okay. Under registration, under the index, I might put just things so we can go to that form. I'm just going to do, so let's do it as a P, at HTML action link. And I'm going to do register, comma, and it's actually register is right. Now again, if you name this second one is the name of your view. The first one is the text that's going to show up, and the second one is the name of your view. So make sure you name the view. That if they're not the same, like if you named it registering or whatever, this has to be the name of the view. I'm putting that there so that I can link from this page back to the form. This is not crucial, but it'll make life easier. And then the very last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to the shared layout, and I'm going to add a link to the register. This is layout under shared and views. And this is where you get the menu at the top. And I'm just so I'm going to put as a menu option register. Actually, I called it register. Well, register is all right. And I'm going to go to index, and it's, for me, the folder name is registration, I think. Yes.
The first one
The
is
first
what
one
the
is
person sees. The second one
is the name of the view, and this is the folder that the view is in.
Got it.
I put those are extras. Those are all extras. I'm going to run it from here just to show you how that works. But if you didn't do this, run it from the form. Probably. I'll come troubleshoot in a minute too. All right, so this is the book review, and the books come up on front. I did that. Right, so, but notice I've got the register here, so I'm going to go there. And actually, I went to index, and I probably, these are the people that we had. I maybe should have gone to register, but now I'm going to click on register, that little link we had there. And here's our form. And you could run directly from this form if you want, rather than go through that elaborate thing. So let's create a user. So a username, I'm not in there as a user yet, am I? So let's do, I'll just do my S. Conger. And I'll do Steve Conger. This isn't a real email, by the way. Plain password. It's good to do. I'm just going to do pass. Now, one of the things you can do, but I'm not doing it right now, is there are ways to mask this, right? So you don't have to look at the password when I do it. So I've got all of that. I'm going to do create. If it works, we come back here and there I am, right? The fact that I'm on this page when it comes back here means that it is in the database. And if we want, we can look at that. It'll have things that aren't shown here, like their hash password. How many worked or didn't work? I know you got behind on
when I
it.
go to the register, pay registration.
It's an error on the page itself.
Yeah, like when I click on register,
Oh, so
when I click there,
that just means that you. So let's look at your link.
which this one?
So not that one. The link on the index page for the.
This one.
No, the other one. The one
layout?
Where, yeah, the index page for the.
Okay.
Why don't you stop? So the index page for registration. Registration. You're missing a T. Or maybe you're not. Is it spelled right? It looks. Registration looks like it's spelled right. Why is it not seeing it? Oh, because yours is called, your form is called register.
Okay.
So this one is the text again, and the next one is the. That one can
Got it.
stay.
This one.
Yeah, it's the other one that needs to change.
This okay.
Yeah.
Got it. To the form name, not the file.
Yeah. All right, so there's something in your store procedure. So let's look at that. Did you read it?
Oh, I forgot right there.
No, you got it.
Oh,
So let's go back to the. It's back to control. Here it goes. So let's look at the. User. Did you leave in the field out? Let's look over here. Let's try it. Okay. So, how many are failing on the stored procedure? One of the things you can do is look at the. Let's see
This is in that.
So if you get that, throw the error in the procedure means it goes back into the debugger mode with the green line on that.
the green line one. So you could do, there's a couple of things that it'll do. Or I was thinking to just try to do somebody else.
Yeah.
If somebody's in there already,
Yeah.
particularly the emails have to be unique.
Somebody who's already there.
Yeah. Let me see if I can make it go into debug mode. I don't know if. Yeah, if you do that, that'll be a crash. So let's go. And I actually think the same email could crash it too. All right, go to the crash. Wow, it's taking it a long time to crash.
It still takes you back, not to lose information in there.
So why is mine not doing anything? It should crash. Right now it should crash. So where it should go is it should take you to the stored procedure where it's described in the auto-generated code from when we drug in the thing.
Mine is sitting on the return line with all the circles.
The return in the controller. So it could be, do you have, so you did a return direct action to index? Which line, the last return or the?
This is in book review model context.
Right, right. So, and then it should go to, why is it not? I'm going to kill it and try to kill it again. So what I want to do is show you a couple of places to debug this. That should crash. Okay, so it goes to the object context execute function. All right, so this is basically it's receiving an error back from the SQL. Mine is because I didn't pass any values. But you should be able to like highlight the field and click on that, and it should show like this one says null. None of these can be null. Is there anything? So what I did is I moused over the field, and then underneath it, it came up viewer username parameter. There's a little arrow there, a little triangle. When you hit it, it goes down here and it tells you that it's a string, the name of it, and that the value right now is null. That's because I just clicked the form with empty. So it's telling me that that's null. One of the things you should be able to do is it the right value though? Look at it for each one of them.
Yeah, that's what I got first. I said like, cannot insert anything. I inserted values into each of these.
So what is it? Does it give you an error as to what?
Just scroll down to nothing, the error user, exception user error, and result.
Yeah, so you look at this. What I would do, so if you do view details, this should give you a little bit more detail, but it's actually not doing much there. So you go into exception, you go down there. Inner exception, cannot insert null into column. Do you have that kind of thing?
Cannot insert null into column word last.
So,
It's saying that I'm not inserting the value.
right, so if it's not inserting a value in there, then the chances are, so if we go to the register controller, one of the things to check is make sure that all the fields are here, and then that they've been added here. If those are all good, then you need to look at your form and make sure you named all the fields right. Does that make sense? So here, we've added username, first name, last name, email, plain password, and gave it a thing. These have to be the same. Basically, when you do the new reviewer, you have to have the username, first name, last name, email, and plain password. And it's review plain password. So then if I go to the register form, there's reviewer username, reviewer first name. Yeah. And this is review plain password, which is different than the others because it's not reviewer. Yeah, and it's my mistake ultimately because I did it in the database.
So it should be review.
It should be review.
Okay.
And it's doing you're entering a null for that because there isn't a reviewer plain password in the table.
I have
You have review plain password.
yeah. It says reviewer last name is the wrong way.
So when you look at the reviewer last name, did you, couple of things,
Compared to the controller, and it says
make sure that all three are changed. Yeah.
it worked. Let's look at the
So the other thing, So it's still good. Yeah. It should be capital, actually. It's not capital, let's look at these purposes. Oh, okay. Yeah, this one will be fine, except there's a lot of data data, and obviously there's a couple of differences. Yeah. Any little typo will cause.
Oh, yeah. So I had with you user.
Right, yeah.
It's in that string where the enclosed says.
Yeah, and I don't like that. I don't like that string thing. Sure.
Yeah, so you can't really tell us this when you do the if and the if. So, well, yeah, when you're doing the binding, which is really important for it, you should have the intelligence like that. Instead of relying on the simple copy organization.
I can't. Well, let me.
So in
Yours work okay?
in your homework, you describe the difference of adding the two, blending the two.
So-
Class.
What time have we got?
12 o'clock.
Well,
Tell you what, I will on the blog if you want to work on it before. What I was thinking is I'll put on the blog what the class would look like, and then tell you where you just add it to models, and then everything else is the same. You attach it to the model. Remember how we built the class the very first day, first assignment? It's like that, except you build it with the fields from person and the fields with person address. Well, we technically have 10 minutes. Do you want me to try to do it now?
So all of these right here.
Yeah. You still need this? This is actually posted online too. Yeah, it's on GitHub. So let me real quickly, and you can leave if you want. I'm going to go File. I'm going to open my Community Assist version here. My Community Assist isn't as fully developed, but I did add the model. And this won't take too long. We've, as I said, technically still got like 10 minutes. So you can see I have the model there. I haven't run like all the other stuff, but what I'm going to do is on models, I'm going to right click and I'm going to add, and I'm going to add a class. Now, this is going to be person and person address, but I don't want to name it any of those things. So I think I'm going to name it, oh, for lack of something better, new person. So we need all the fields. One of the things we could do is we could look at the stored procedure and see what it has. But basically, we need, and they don't have to have the same name. So I'm going to say string last name and then get set. And it should be public too. So public string. And again, I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to put this on the blog. First name. Yeah, for the actual assignment, because you need to bring the class together. So what are, does you have some of the fields there? First name, email.
Yeah, in person, it's person, last name, person, first name, email, phone number, password.
And again, I'm not naming it exactly the same, though you certainly could. Email, phone.
Yeah.
We need the plain password, right?
Yeah. It's, I don't know if this matters or not, in the person class, it's stored as a byte.
Oh,
Password is.
well, that's actually the actual password.
Oh, okay.
The hashed one.
Gotcha.
So, and then we need like the street. So maybe apartment. I think you can leave apartment out,
I think
but
that's, yeah, that. Oh, and we're adding all of the address ones.
right. So we're adding all the address ones. So public string, what is it, apartment?
Mm-hmm.
Although you could leave that out if you want it. Public string. Actually, I think you need to put it in there just for the.
Are you usually uppercase?
I do for these because of the way that it handles the gets and sets. Regular variables are lowercase, but these are what they call properties. They're a little bit higher level than the underlying variable. Yes, thank you. What it'll do is it'll capitalize the underlying variable if the outer one was not. It'll just give it a different case. So we got street, what, city, state? We had zip code. Again, you don't have to name these as the same as the underlying fields for the other one, but you do have to map them across. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do zip code. Is there anything else? I think that's about it, isn't it? Is there anything
Zip
in
code, yeah, postal date added.
the stored procedure will add date added, and it'll also hash the password. I think this is good. So once you've done this and saved it, so I'm going to build real quickly. And as I said, I'll post this. When you do a controller, which I won't follow the whole thing through, but if you add a new controller and you do it in empty controller, when you search for the name of it, so you would want to do like new person controller or register controller, whatever you want. It doesn't need to be the same name as the model. It does need to be the same name as the view. So maybe you want to call it register or registration. When I add the registration view, as I said, I won't walk through the whole thing, but I just want to show the model that you want here is going to be the new person class. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you do all this stuff you did before. It's just that you have the new person class. And there's a stored procedure, USP register, I think, or new person. What is it? Anyway, there's a stored procedure that it's exactly like what we did, except that we're using this one class that we made. So, I mean, we would add the models. Again, I don't want to do all of it for you. So this is, what did I call this? Community Assist MVC dot models.
Not new person.
You don't actually have to do that there. What I would do, once you do that, you can do, and it's actually not a part of the MVC, although you probably would want to make that. If I do new person, it should see it. Do I need to do the entities? Might be in the entities. Community Assist. Data entities. Do I have? Yeah, I should see it. I should see it just fine. Why am I not seeing? So in here, oh, you know why I can't see mine? Something you should do? No, it's public class, new person. Should be there. I did build it, I thought. Yours new person is there? It should be there. Should be able to use it. Not sure why mine is not showing it. But anyway, I will put that class up on blog. Everything else is the same principle with all of its pain as well as. And I will post this and then we'll help. It'll be an open lab to work on this Wednesday. All right, so I should be able to help troubleshoot it. So a couple things I'm going to do. I am going to stop the broadcast.